Sahana vavatu, sahano bhunaktu, sahaviryang karavavahai, tejasvina vadhitamastu, ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May we be protected, may we be nourished, may we acquire the capacity to study and understand the scriptures. May our studies be brilliant, may we not quarrel. Peace. A revision. Part 1, verse 1 and 2, nature of this world. And we need to know the nature of this world for the sake of knowing what are we finding ourselves within. In other words, we can only know about something if we are told about what is it that we are participating in. If I say to you, you're in trouble. What did I do? And then I say, do you not realize that we are in a hall and there are social etiquette? There is a rule how to conduct oneself. Have you read those rules? No, I haven't. And then I said, the rules are over there on the board. And you say, oh, I'm so sorry. And then you go to the board and you look at the rules. In other words, as long as we do not know the rules of how to conduct ourselves in a hall in the world, we make innocent mistakes and then we falter. And then we go through a hard time and trying to get up, and then we fall down, try to get up, fall down, try to get up. And this is time consuming and takes a lot of time, energy, and unnecessary effort. So the first step is to point out what is it that the individual is participating in. And we call this in Sanskrit samsara. Samsara is not a negative nor a positive word. It just entails the world which embodies both the ups and downs, the roller coasters, that is the good parts, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Good movie, by the way, of the West. And so part 2 then talks about, which includes verse 3 all the way to 6, the remedies, that is how to conduct ourselves using the 4 rules on that board over there that I pointed you to. And the first rule, as we remember, was dispassion. And dispassion just generally means reducing the bondage towards or of our likes and dislikes that compel us to experience the world nonstop. So this is a nature of a human being. We have a nature to experience. We want to experience all sorts of flavors, and we are just attracted to experience. In fact, all of the marketing and all of the experiences of commercials, they all entail, let me give you an experience. Let me give you the experience of a 6-pack abs. Let me give you the experience of having men look at you because you are beautiful. Let me give you the experience of having some power in some shape, size, or form. And so we say, yep, this is absolutely what I want. I will buy your product. So vairagyam, dispassion, reduces this hoarding, constant accumulating out of or in the name of our likes and dislikes. That means our aversions I don't want and our attractions I do want. This is called raga dvesha. Raga attractions and dvesha aversions. And therefore the first step towards a mature mind is reduction of this immature sense of chasing for experiences. This is still at the level of a teenager, basically, who wants and who doesn't want. So we have to step out of this at all costs, because that is the, what you could call the initiation into womanhood, initiation into manhood. In fact, the cultures, some cultures actually have this initiation into manhood. They will go through some, they will have to pass the test or something. And this test entails, okay, now you've gone through a very hard time and you're now matured. You've now got to the next stage and you've now initiated into, in Sanskrit, we call it the manusha. You're now truly a manusha. And a manusha means a thinking being. So if you are a person, then you are a thinking being. Now, if someone says I'm a person, but they do not think, then that truly is not a manusha. That is a person, but they're not initiated into what we call the manusha, a thinking being. So the nature of a human being is to think, is to assess, is to evaluate what needs to happen here, what needs to be done. And so viveka is this discrimination which naturally develops dispassion. So dispassion and viveka always go hand in hand, and they initiate the person from this little boy, little girl, into a mature, discerning human being, responsible, participating within their sphere of influence in this world, doing the very little that you can. It's not like you need to go and save the world, but you say simply, what part do I play? What little part do I play in this world? Right, the huge, vast world of so many, so many things that are going on. What little part do I play in that I'm good at? That is the part that you participate in. In fact, the whole message of the Bhagavad Gita is that is all you need to do for the sake of your own happiness. Now, if you're asking how to be happy, you can either go and read 20 psychology books on that, or you can take the simple message and say, what little part do I have in this world while I'm alive? And that is the part that you participate in gladly. That means active contribution while keeping your eye on sadhana number 2. We talked about devotion, bhakti. Bhakti simply entails whether the person is liberated or not. That doesn't matter. In fact, whether one has this knowledge, firm or not, that is completely, utterly irrelevant. No one wants to know that. No one even cares. What really matters at the end of the day is humility. Am I constantly holding my vision onto that grander intelligence, which has supported this world before this body was born, is supporting this world right now, and will continue to support this world when this body dies. And that grander intelligence we call Lord or Ishvaraha. Therefore, devotion has nothing to do with saying how I'm liberated or I don't know. No one really cares about that. What really matters in and through all of that is, do I have humility? I'm not putting myself up nor down, but just participating in line with my duties and keeping the eye with this grander intelligence that is making it all happen right now, and will continue to make it happen when this body goes. So now imagine a person gets born and they say, I'm an avatar, right? I am some kind of a special being. Worship me, right? This intelligence has been there before this person claims that, has been there for eons. This intelligence is still running that very person's heart right now. Brain cells are working because of that intelligence called Ishvaraha. And when that person who's claiming to be this or that will go one day, but that intelligence will continue to give birth and continue to sustain this world for other beings. Therefore, devotion is always being humble in the light of that vaster intelligence that is running the show right now. This has got nothing to do with going, oh, well, wait a minute, I'm Brahman, right? I'm above this intelligence, right? This intelligence requires my presence to be. If the person's thinking like this, it's very hard to save them, I tell you, because they're living in a bubble, and that bubble is very hard to grow through. So even though you know the nature of myself is the Sat-Chit, you also keep the eye of Ishvaraha. Ishvaraha that is sustaining this world right now and is sustaining every jiva right now. Whether liberated or not, that doesn't matter. As long as the person is breathing, they have a responsibility to keep that ground order as the number one priority in and through all of their activities. And this is called humility, which finally leads into, or is not apart from, sadhana number 3, which is sadgunaha, or good virtues. Good virtues entails living life honestly and with virtues. So how do we conduct our life? Honestly. So if you want to summarize all of those 20 values into one single word, it is honest. Be honest to yourself. Be honest to what decisions I need to take now. Okay, what decision do I honestly want to participate in right now that will sustain my harmony, but also the harmony of those that are involved. Honesty and virtue are incorporated in and through all of our activities as much as we can, wherever realistically possible. I'm saying that because sometimes it's not possible to be completely in line with virtue. That is highly unrealistic, considering that the world is set up in such a way that it almost compels the individual through different parts to act dishonestly. For example, suppose you're working at a company and a company expects you to, let's say, advertise, and you're an advertiser, and you're writing words that you don't fully believe in. You know that this product doesn't really make the person happy. It cannot really solve their, their problems, but you're still required to write this message. All right. So in other words, you cannot now say, I'm not want to do this for you because I don't believe in this. So that's why I say this is dynamic. It cannot be rigid. Otherwise, the person cannot move on with life. So that's why I say being honest and virtuous as much as possible, wherever possible, realistically speaking, knowing that it is at the same time not entirely possible, considering that the world that we live in is a mixture of samsara. That means it requires, it has both parts. It has the dark side, it has the light side. It has something in between. Therefore, there is a certain navigation that the person has to find themselves navigating in this world. And finally, we talked about Atma Yanum, which is the fourth sadhana. And that involves removing the notion that I am different or that I am away from the final reality. So if we look at the chart again, when I showed you that big picture, that hierarchy of the entire creation, I said the final reality is Satchit. Everything from Satchit appears through the power of this Maya. So now let's look at objects in this world. Suppose there's Allison over here. Allison looks at something in her room, for example, pet or tree or something. All of that is here on Earth. Whatever planet you're talking about, is this planet, including Allison, including her brain cells, including her thoughts, is any of that away from Satchit? No. Is the worlds of other worlds that we don't know about, other civilizations, if there are any, is that away from Satchit? No. Is the tree away from Satchit? No. Are the elements away from Satchit? Is your breath right now, the air that you're breathing, is that away from Satchit? Are the eyes that are required, the chakshuhu golakam required to see this, the zoom right now that's happening, is that away from Satchit? It's just materials. Is the jiva, your minds and thoughts, is that away from Satchit? No matter where you look at this side, whether you look at this side, whichever way you look at it, it is all Satchit appearing as different names and forms. Then part 2, it said that this reality, Satchit, is in the form of the jiva. And in verse 7 and 8, Krishna said that, who is speaking as Brahman. So in chapter 15, when Krishna speaks, he's speaking as Brahman, the final reality, Satchit. He says that I appear as the multiple eternal jivas in this world. I appear as countless eternal jivas in this world. And just to give you an example, it's like the waker appears as many jivas in the dream. Okay, so the huge vast dream of different jivas, and it's only all reflected, or it's all going back into that one single waker that is completely fine, and the dream has nothing to do with him or her. So whatever happens in your dream, does that affect you? No. Suppose you kill someone in a dream, and then you wake up and you go to the police station and you say, I killed someone. And I say, okay, where's the body? And then you say, it's in my dream. I say, sorry, it doesn't apply, because that is a different order of reality. So in other words, whatever happens here, it actually doesn't affect your true self, Satchit. Now, where the danger comes is when a person hears this, they say, oh, great, now I can indulge in my likes and dislikes. So this is why I said earlier on, you need to first go through those 4 sadhanas. Otherwise, people love to hear this and go, okay, now I can, it happens very often, now I can sleep around, I can, indulge here and there. It doesn't work like that, because as I said, the person that I'm hurting, because there are always repercussions, the person that I'm hurting is none other than Satchit, who is myself. So if one is really ascertaining this knowledge, they will genuinely care about the well-being of other people, and that will make it impossible for them to do something fishy or do some kind of manipulation, because they know they're only manipulating oneself. Therefore, if this knowledge is firm, one lives how? With virtue and honestly. And that's why those 4 Krishna speak as the Ishvara, as Brahman. I appear as eternal jivas. The next question is, what is an eternal jiva? A traveling, conscious, subtle body. So what is a traveling, conscious, subtle body? Just like right now, your mind is conscious. And that mind, when I say subtle body, just means the mind. That one travels when there is death process. And that one travels from body to body to body to body, and he has the capacity to travel like that and inherit different physical bodies eternally until it finally liberates, or more accurately to say, until it recognizes that it is much bigger than just this, simple, subtle body in this physical body. That's called liberation. So what is an eternal jiva? A subtle body that is traveling and inheriting different physical bodies, life after life, owing to its ignorance, thinking that it is this much. It is this much embodiment of these thoughts, embodiment of these emotions, embodiment. And then when he inherits a body, he says, I am this much, the body also, and my thoughts. Now, when this conscious, subtle body that travels, when it inherits the physical body, as it has right now, so for all of us, the physical body is inherited. What happens then is this physical body also gains consciousness. If you imagine thought just traveling, and then when the thought, which is conscious of itself, when the thought inherits the physical body, then because the mind, the subtle body, is conscious, it now makes the sensations of the body also conscious. So if there's some pain in that physical body, immediately that also now comes into the awareness of that subtle body, that conscious subtle body. Whereas without the physical body, that subtle body knows itself as itself exactly the same, while just like being in a physical body, but minus the sensations of the physical body. That is the only difference between being alive in this physical body and what we call a person that is pronounced dead when they have left the physical body. Like a simple order, if you look at any individual right now, what do you see? You see sentience, you see aliveness. But that aliveness belongs to what? The subtle body. But that subtle body is sentient because of what? The original chit. Now that chit is what's called God, awareness. So if you look at any single human being alive, what are you seeing? You're not seeing God directly, but you're seeing God indirectly. How? As the very conscious person is what we say God. Therefore, we don't have to look elsewhere. Where's God? Let me meditate for hours and years to discover God. Just look at any sentient human being and recognize that is because there is a subtle body inheriting that person, that physical body. And that subtle body is further made conscious because of this one Sat Chit that is making all subtle bodies conscious. That's making Vishal's subtle body conscious, Victor's subtle body conscious, Catherine's subtle body conscious, Adrian's subtle body conscious. Everyone's subtle body is being made conscious. But because the subtle body is inheriting a physical body, thus the physical body also becomes conscious. If I take a little needle and I prick myself, I prick the body, then there will be a sensation of that. Why? Because the mind is inheriting this physical body. If the mind exits, that's called death, then if you prick, there's no sensation. Why? Because there's no indweller. There is no one to experience. There's no conscious indweller to experience the sensation that's being pricked. Suppose David is an electrician and he says, it's a live wire. Now, what does David mean when he says the wire is live? Does he mean that the wire is moving and saying hello, namaste? No. What David means when he says that is that there's an invisible principle pervading that wire. So it's not like the wire has sentiency of its own. We only say live wire because of something that is invisible, making it as though live. So even though the wire is originally dead, we call it live wire only in reference to once being pervaded by that electricity. Or if I say to you, for example, hey, is there electricity? And then you turn on the lights. Now, do you tell me, hey, look at the bulb? Do you tell me that? You don't say that. You say, look, you just point at the bulb and you say, look, there's power. But what do you really mean by that? Hey, look, because of that bulb, that fragile bulb that can easily shatter, that's called the physical body, by the way, there is a filament inside. That's called a subtle body, by the way. The filament shines the light, shines the vibrancy. That's how our physical bodies are. You shine the vibrancy. You look at any human being, go, oh, wow, they're so vibrant. because the subtle body is shining through the physical body. If you've ever seen a dead body, it is completely relaxed. There's no life in it. There's no vibrancy at all because there's no shine coming through. So you look at the bulb fragile, shatters easily, the filament partially seen, called a subtle body, but that shine, does that belong to the filament, or is that shine because of something else that's completely invisible? It is because of the invisible electricity, and that electricity is compared to the chit, the awareness. So the chit, the subtle body, and then which needs a physical body to come through, and that is called your stula sharira, your physical body, just like the electricity, the filament, and the light bulb. What happens at time of death? At the time of death, this conscious, subtle body that is right now illumining this body, and that's why it's illuminating these eyes. That's why the eyes can see. That's why your ears can hear, because there's a subtle body shining through the physical body. This conscious, subtle body at the time of death simply disassociates from it using what's called the Udana Prana. Udana Prana, as I said, is that prana that ejects the subtle body from a non-working machine, from a non-working unit. In other words, the unit is no longer capable of harboring a very subtle form of energy called the subtle body, and therefore the prana does its job, and therefore it disassociates. And this conscious, subtle body is still aware of itself, just like it was lying in the bed 5 minutes ago when it was maybe squeezing the final, maybe the partner's hand, maybe the children were around, and you're seeing your children or whatever, right? Or whoever's around, and you're aware of yourself, like I am, and then I am, and I'm gonna miss you. The moment there's death, you're still aware of that exact same person that was just there 5 minutes ago, but minus the awareness of the aches and pains of that physical body, and minus the awareness of anything that the body was undergoing in that moment while it was lying in bed. In other words, you're still completely aware as a jiva of yourself with the same memories, same emotions, same everything, minus the experience of the physical body. And therefore minus the experience of the world, because this world is there, but it can only be seen as there by the presence of this physical instrument. So you need the ears, you need the eyes, you need to be looking through this instrument to say, aha, there's the world. Look, there's my children, there's my wife standing on, there's my husband on the bedside, and so on. But because the subtle body is no longer associated, then there's no more sight of them. It's like they're gone, but they're not actually gone. It's just that your physical body can no longer see them because you as a jiva are no longer inheriting the physical body. So suppose you're keeping a body alive artificially, right? And then there's breathing and there's a heart still beating, and you look at a person and go, oh, they're technically alive, but they're not alive. You're only keeping the physical body alive, but there's no indweller there. So that person is as good as, you cannot even say, oh, look, my dear one, because your dear one is not in that physical body. They're elsewhere. They've already gone somewhere. So in other words, you can keep that physical body alive all you want, but because it is incapable of hosting the subtle body, we can say that body might as well just be dead. Right? There's no one there. There's no person in the house. It's like you knock on someone's door and there's no person in the house. There's no indweller there. Now, what about a coma? This is a common question people ask. Now, a coma is whereby the jiva, the subtle, there's still that Udana Prana is not being severed. So there's still an association between the subtle body and the gross body. But because the brain is not capable of hosting the mind, the subtle body, so that jiva is in a state of like deep sleep, because there's still an association to the physical body, but the physical body is incapable of supporting that jiva in terms of being dynamic. So therefore, that's why it's always a hard decision. That's why they say sometimes, they're being on a machine for such a long time. Should we cut the life support? And then you say yes. Because that jiva is basically in a like a twilight zone, like a deep sleep. There's no progress with that jiva, so you might as well just say yes, and then they need to go. And therefore, when the body stops, then the Udana Prana comes, and then it severs the physical body and the subtle body, and then the jiva is finally released into the light. Verse 8 has the words, this word Ishwaraha in verse 8 is not referring to Ishwaraha. Ishwaraha also refers to master, just means master. So who's the master of the physical body? The jiva is. In other words, the jiva here is called the Ishwaraha, the Lord of the physical body has left. So when the body stops, the only thing that a scientist can tell you is the organs have stopped, right? The organs have ceased. But what they cannot tell you is that actually what happened is the indweller, which is the reflecting medium, that's called the subtle body, the reflecting medium and the reflected consciousness has left the physical body because the prarabdha karma has been exhausted. They have no longer, the body is no longer suitable for helping the person progress. Therefore, they have to move to a different body to continue their lessons, to continue their spiritual progress.
So, Andre, this jiva without body, does it have the feelings of hunger or pain or
No.
the other things? Because I believe that jiva, the subtle body, consists of the prana, gyanendriya, karmendriya, manas, and buddhi.
Good, correct.
And this hunger, pain, and seeing and taking the knowledge, these are the functions of
the Annamaya Kosha.
Yes.
The Annamaya Kosha.
Annamaya Kosha?
So
Annamaya Kosha is just the instrument through which it
yeah, so the Annamaya Kosha, sure. So the Annamaya Kosha, the food sheath, it becomes malnutritioned. So in other words, it needs some nutrition. And then the Pranamaya Kosha requires the Annamaya Kosha. When that Annamaya Kosha is gone, as you're just asking, then Pranamaya Kosha is not doing anything. It's just receded and not doing anything. Therefore, hunger is not possible because it requires the Annamaya Kosha for that hunger to even come there. But it's not like the Pranamaya Kosha is gone. It's still there, but it's receded and it's dormant.
And it's same for the manas as well as buddhi. So the subtle body does not have, that capability of having the knowledge as well as analyzing it.
Yeah, you need a physical body for having the knowledge, analyzing your experience, because without a physical body, experiences are like a dream. They're too fluid. So one needs that physical body stability to have a momentary thought and think about it for a few seconds and then move on. See, when there's no more physical body, immediately that jiva is no longer subject to time and space that is subject here. And that time and space is highly malleable, it's highly flexible. And that doesn't allow that assessment of one's experience. And that's why we say, get all of your assessments done while you are in a waking state. Suppose the person doesn't attain moksha, then in between lives, the person is able to have a clarity of vision, what's going on in reference to their experience.
So how do we explain the customs that we have in India, where we do Shraddha karma, as well as, do offerings for our pitras, the ancestors.
Yeah.
And when we do that, we say that they accept the offerings like food and water and these things.
Yeah, sure.
And I've also heard, many stories where the people who get into the Pret yonis. If you remember Srimad Bhagavad Katha, there is a story where a person, becomes the Preta, and he was feeling he was feeling uneasy, and he asked his brother to do something for him, so he gets mukti from that Preta yoni.
Pitraloka, first of all, praying to our ancestors. So that implies that the ancestors probably are in Pitraloka. We don't know. They could have come back into a physical body. Or maybe Pitraloka is referring to the quote, the waiting period, because as I said, it's a different time-space region, whereby, that jiva is now waiting for the right moment to inherit the physical body. Otherwise, that much beyond that, I cannot explain, because I have to now investigate and look at the context of the whole thing.
Okay. Because there's this famous story in Bhagavatam.
Yeah.
That starts with this, the entire Bhagavad starts with Gokarna's story. There was a sage, Gokarna, and then he narrated the entire Bhagavatam for the sake of that his brother who became the Preta and who was feeling, all the emotions that he was he had during his waking state or when he had body.
So his brother, I'm not familiar with this. So his brother is no longer in the physical body, and he's having the emotions.
Yes, and he's saying that, dear brother, I'm feeling so uneasy because I'm in this Preta Yoni. I feel hunger, but I can't have food because I don't have body. I feel thirsty, but I can't have, water because I don't have body. And I'm in this Preta Yoni. So please do something to, release me from this.
Yeah.
And therefore the entire Bhagavad starts that, okay, when you listen to this Bhagavad, Krishna's story, the Krishna Leelas, so that will, relieve you from this Preta Yoni.
Yeah, the only thing that's coming to me now, it's a very good point. If you can point me to the Bhagavatam, is when it says hunger and I'm desiring, so I'm desirous, then it's probably referring to that I'm desirous of wanting to live into another world, desirous of wanting to inherit another body and enjoy the hunger, enjoy the food. So it's going back to likes and dislikes, because food and all of that is referring to what the person, all of those impressions that the person has developed in a prior life. And so now they're saying, I want to continue living. And it's paining me not to have that. So I need another physical body. You want to add anything onto that?
No, not now.
Okay.
I'll share the story with you, the text, because there are, many stories, and even the entire custom of Pitra and Shraddha is based on this, that the people who leave the body, they still want, these things. And it makes them like tripti, you're feeding them.
Can a subtle body think even if the hardware physical brain is not there? The first answer is it's hard to tell because we cannot directly prove it, right? The subtle body only comes back into the physical body, but you cannot, suppose you ask your child, hey, how was your in between life experience? Did you think? And the child's not going to tell you because they forgot. So since I cannot answer that accurately, I'm going to just leave it at that. But I will, though, state that the time-space is different, and the most sustainable environment for thinking is the Bhuloka, is the world, is the earth, because it's solid and it's gross. So let's see what happens at the time upon birth. From verse 9 and 10 will be birth, and 11 will be those who are discerning and those who are non-discerning. Shrotram chakshusparshanam cha rasanam granam evacha adhishtaya manaschayam vishayan upasevate.
Presiding over the ear, the eye, the senses of touch, taste and smell, and the mind, this person, Jiva, experiences the sense object.
Utkramantam stitam vapi bhunjanam vagunan vitam vimodhananupashyanti pashyanti jnana chakshushaha.
The deluded do not see the one who is departing from the body or even remaining in this body, experiencing or endowed with the gunas. Those who have the eye of wisdom see.
Yatanto yoginaschainam pashyantyad manyavastitam yatanto pyatkrtatmanaha nainam pashyantya chetasaha.
The yogins who are making effort see this self, obtaining in the buddhi. Those whose minds are not mature and who do not have viveka do not see this Atman, even if they are making effort.
Verse 9, the newborn jiva experiences the world through 5 instruments of perception, which is the ear, eye, skin, tongue, nose, and mind. The eternal jiva carries the subtle body. In fact, the eternal jiva is the subtle body. The subtle body is the eternal jiva, as long as one doesn't know one's true nature. It carries its karma indriyani, its pancha jnana indriyani, its capacity to perceive, its capacity to act. And if that subtle body, suppose it enters a tree, right? Suppose something happens, someone's punya papam is such a mixture and it turns into a tree. Then does the tree have chakshuhu golakam? No. Does the tree have shrotram golakam? The ear? No. Does the tree have skin? Yes. In fact, the plants can feel. Scientists have already proven that plants can feel certain, they exude a certain, if they attach some instrument. And so that jiva, suppose it enters a tree, only the skin's indriya will actually attach to the tree's golakam, to the tree's outer skin. But because the tree doesn't have the ear, doesn't have the nose, doesn't have the eyes, so for that jiva, will only feel in reference to the tree's bark or the tree's, I don't know what's the experience with a tree like, but it's only going to feel. It's not going to see, it's not going to hear. Whereas suppose that jiva enters a human body, then what's going to happen? Those pancha indriyanis and pancha karma indriyanis, they're going to attach to the respective golakams on the physical body. So the capacity to see, which is part of the subtle body, is going to attach to the physical eye. The capacity to hear is going to attach to the physical ear. The capacity to feel, tactile feedback, is going to attach to the outer edges or to the actual outer edges of the skin to be able to feel sensations. And so all of the karma indriyanis and pancha indriyanis, they will attach their respective golakams, the respective physical instruments of the physical body. And therefore, the experience of the body begins. Why? Because the attachment has been successfully done, right? So now the body starts to get felt. Now there's if you imagine like a body that's completely lifeless, right? And it has the ability to feel, it has the ability to perceive the world. But because there's no indweller, there's no experience. The moment that indweller takes on that body, it attaches to respective physical golakam, and thus that body now goes, wow, new world. What is this? Butterfly, tortoise, moon, sun, and it's fascinated by all of these things. And then that life comes to an end. What happens then? That same subtle body that was there attaching to those respective golakams, those physical instruments, now leaves that same body, leaving the body aside, no longer capable of sensing the world, and it exits through what we call different nadis. This is talked about in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Katha Upanishad, and also Sambrahma Sutra. It exits through certain nadis. It could be along the Shushumna nadi, Sahasrara, could be Muladhara. I don't know who's going to exit there unless the person's probably having some lower thoughts. But it's generally going to exit depending on the mixture of person's punya and papa. So suppose the person's done very good in this world, then it's probably going to exit, in the Sahasrara. Probable points whereby the subtle body exits the physical body is through the eyes. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but I think Lorena has. And the moment before the person dies, their eyes will get very bright. Have you seen this, Lorena? Now, why is that? Because the subtle body, what is a subtle body? It is a reflecting medium of consciousness. And if you look at someone's eyes in that moment, they are absolutely beautiful to see. Am I close?
Absolutely correct.
Yeah,
that's one of the things I will always remember. That moment. It's something that once you see it, you can't forget it.
Yeah, because it's so, you're actually seeing a closest manifestation of consciousness, because that entire subtle body, the person you that I'm talking to right now, will actually exit through the physical eye. And because it is a reflecting medium of consciousness, the eyes will shine. And then the person moments later will just die. And therefore, it can be through the eyes, it can be through any one of the points along the Shushumna Nadi, depending on what kind of the punya papa mixture the individual has, but also their dharma and the way they have conducted themselves. And therefore, that will determine then the next life that they will take on. So again, backtrack. Depending on what point along the Shushumna Nadi the subtle body exits, also determines what life they're going to take on in the next life, determines what kind of a body, what kind of a life they'll be having next. And then it's going to take the body of a baby, right, of the embryo and so on. But suppose the baby's not born. Then what happens is it starts to slowly unpack its faculties from, for example, breathing. That's the most basic faculty of life. It starts to unpack that and starts to breathe. And it starts to unpack the capacity to walk, to think, to eat. You even have to teach a baby the basics of the basics, how to eat. In other words, they'll just trip in, big mess. So in other words, you have to retrain it all over again, because its faculties are not capable of expressing through the physical brain, because the physical brain is still, the neurons are not even developed. So you need to restructure those neurons, and thus you need to train the baby. It's not like the subtle body doesn't know how to eat. It's not like the subtle body doesn't know how to walk. It already knows that, but because it's restricted by the dendrites in the neurons of the physical brain, you have to restructure the physical brain so that that faculty, that subtle faculty of walking and thinking, actually can express through the physical body. And that's why you have to train ourselves. We have to train ourselves basic skills, align the physical brain with that capacity of the subtle body. If you look at any human being, it is literally a testimony of God. The human being is conscious, like sentient. Conscious because the subtle body is inheriting the human being. The subtle body in itself cannot be aware unless this chit is shining onto it. Therefore, every human being you look from now on, you can start to see a different light in them. There's God shining through this physical body. And despite all of this, we still ask, where's the proof of God? Just look at your neighbor, look at your insect, look at the mosquito. Even mosquito is enough to show the proof of God. Okay, so body, mind, chit, and that chit is the final reality. Therefore, the body reveals God indirectly, just like the bulb reveals the light or the electricity indirectly.
I guess from what I understand at the moment, I would just try and reflect on the fact that I know I am the self and just try and relax. But it's one thing to have all the sort of not notions, but explanations. But what would you want for other people? What would you want for yourself? And how would you conduct yourself? What would you think?
Absolutely. Death is the most important ceremony of your life. Actually, it's when you put aside all of your people that you know and your business away. You don't think about. What about
I don't think it's shameful or embarrassing to think, well, actually, if it ever came to, well, of course it will come to it, what would I do? So just to have a little bit of an idea of preparation.
In chapter 8, we were talking about the extensive death process, how to die. It was entitled How to Die. And you basically think about divinity. You think about anything that represents divine. It could be a love or Om, focus on Om or anything like that. So it is a private, personal moment whereby you think of nothing but wanting to move on, to just release yourself from samsara, no longer come back. Now, of course, you don't want to be thinking that, because whatever you think, you actually become. So you should already ascertain that by then. So what I mean by that is, if you think, I don't want to come back, you're actually thinking about coming back, right? So that's why I say you always put your thoughts onto something that represents divinity for you. So this means you have to ascertain that knowledge really firmly now, whatever that symbol that represents divinity for you, and that much you can focus on. Or you don't have to focus at all. If you're really strong in your self-knowledge, you don't have to focus on anything. But generally, as chapter 8 in the Gita will say, focus on something that represents God for you. Being born a baby, could this be why ignorance keeps on occurring? Is the physical lifespan too short to realize the true nature? The physical, there is no yes or no. It depends on how much effort you put into it, how much serious you want to be. You can say, it doesn't really matter. I can go through Grahasta and I can go through my Vanaprastha and Sannyasi much, much later at 60s. You can think like that if you want. But the thing is, there's no guarantee, because by then you're probably going to be dulled out, tired, you want to take a trip or vacation. So the best general rule of thumb is start as early as possible, right? And it's very hard as a young person, especially for those, I don't know who's young here. You see, even the word young is relative. But generally, young people often think, I'm missing out, right? I want, to experience the world. But then Vedanta comes and says, yeah, but you already experienced the world so many lifetimes. Why do you want to experience it one more time? Now, if you say that much to a young person, they're still not going to listen to you. So it's very hard to get across to a younger person. So as I say again, it really depends. I personally think the life is way too long for us. I think life should be no more than 30, because it just personal perspective. It gets one to really, be sharp, to get the job done, to compress it all, have a sense of urgency, and then die and then move on. You know, you have a person 40, 50, 60, 80 consuming world resources and yet not interested in any of the self-knowledge. So what point
And
is...
in the olden days, they probably did have shorter lifespans, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because of disease and whatever else.
Yeah, so I prefer that, actually.
But isn't the lifespan actually depending on your samskaras to exhaust the vasanas and things?
Yeah, see, that's a good
I
point.
don't think because you're young, that means you're ready for all this, because the seed has to be there, planted and ready to absorb all this. But if that person is not ready, you know, what does it matter, the time span?
Yeah, exactly.
So
That's why we get, see, you know, what's the logic of rebirth, even though we can't prove it. The logic is that, you know, suppose you don't get a second chance, right? Suppose that you get born in a family, get abused, and that takes away your capacity to be interested in something higher, right? Isn't it fair to get a second chance, right? So everyone gets a second chance, and that's why we need to give the jiva another chance. And that's what we mean by the transmigrating jiva that takes on another body, right? Someone gets abused, you know, someone gets shot, someone gets an irresponsible driver and kills me, right? And I was just finding my guru, right? So the best person I ever found. I found my guru. Next day I get you know, run over. Shouldn't I deserve another chance? Absolutely. So this is one way to show that this incarnation, the next life, has to be there for the sincere jiva to continue his or her journey. Now, also what Rani was saying, see, this is an interesting point, linking with Lorena. You've got your prarabdha karma that supposedly determines your lifespan, but then you also got, for example, 1800s, whereby the lifespan was shorter due to lack of medicine. So now we have to reconcile that. So that's something for you to think about. How do you reconcile those two things? And then honestly, these godly people do not give the mind feeling that they are gods.
That's why I was smiling.
Verse 10.
The ignorant don't know that the reflected consciousness mixed with reflected medium, the subtle body, leaves the dead body, nor do they know these same two principles enliven the gross body. While the wise see this through the eye of wisdom. Is that right?
So in other words, what I was just saying is that the wise, we call it the jnana chakruhu, you know, have the eye of wisdom. And because of this eye of wisdom, they actually see what happens. Not actually, they don't see like a subtle body, oh, look, it's floating up. But through knowledge alone, they as though see what happens upon death of their loved one. So first is, what's the difference between reflected consciousness and original consciousness? So original consciousness is Chit, right? The highest reality, Brahman. What is reflected consciousness and what is original consciousness? So when original consciousness, it's on a paper, when that original Chit expresses through the subtle body through the mind, then, it's also called the reflecting medium, by the way. So when I say subtle body, I just mean reflecting medium. That's capable of reflecting consciousness, the special subtle matter that's able to reflect the all-pervasive Chit. That's why a rock, you know, it cannot be aware because it doesn't have the subtle body. So when the original consciousness expresses through the subtle body, then that consciousness that is expressing through the subtle body is called reflected consciousness. So just like, you know, a mirror, and we call it the reflected sunlight, right? We don't call it the original light. Even it is the original, but we just call it reflected. And I say, why don't you just call it original? Just to give it some definition, some contrast between the original. And you'll see now why, because it's going to say what travels after death. It's going to say the reflecting medium and the reflected consciousness. You can't say that the original consciousness is traveling, because original consciousness is all pervasive. And that's why we add this chidabhasa, this extra word, this reflected. So again, Vedanta is very precise in its vocabulary, but don't get confused, like, you know, what's this different reflected consciousness, original? It's one consciousness. When it's reflected, it's called, it's reflected consciousness. Chidabhasa or Pratibimba Chaitanya. And when it shines on the subtle body, it gives it sentiency. And because it then inherits the physical body then becomes also sentient and conscious of all of the sensations that are inhered within the physical body. And therefore, the physical body reveals the presence of the mind reveals the presence of God. That's the most important part to understand here, because we can just keep on talking like this, but so what? How does this transform my perception? So therefore, when you see a human being, you can use a simple exercise. I see a physical body. That is because it is inherited by a subtle body, and that subtle body is conscious because God is pervading in and through. And what is God? Awareness in this context. Does the original consciousness inherit the physical body or the subtle body? You're going to say the subtle body. What happens if original consciousness inherits the physical body? What would be the problem with that? You would not die. That would be terrible, because there would be a dead body aware of its deadness, because the original consciousness is stuck to the physical body, right? So in other words, original consciousness is pertinent to the subtle body, but it cannot be pertinent to the physical body. And I want to give you the relationship between the reflected consciousness and original consciousness, just to understand this a little bit better. Suppose that you have the one sun. This is a classical Vedanta example. Suppose you have the one sun shining, and this could be equated to Brahman, right? That's why we often convey the sun as Brahman. And then you have different buckets of water. Now the bucket represents the physical body, the house in which the water, which is a subtle body, can be housed in. So those buckets all have the same water, right? But different contents in the water, depending on its thoughts and emotions. So suppose that the sun is shining on a bucket that's very dirty. Now, what's going to get reflected back? Dirty mind. So what's the person going to say? I am. Now that I, before any qualifier comes later, that I is referring to that original sun that's shining on all buckets. And then whatever comes after am, I am, so and so, all of that belongs to that contents of those buckets. They could be sattva, could be raja, could be tamaguna, or a mixture of all of them. And then the other bucket will be clean enough. And it's also going to say, the nature of myself is not different from the original sun. And the nature of that person, right, the true nature of that person over there who's saying I am this and that, is also not different from the original sun. Whereas the dirty bucket doesn't know that. The dirty bucket is too consumed with the impurities of the mind. So this is why purifying the mind is so important. And this is why we say you need qualifications, right? The person needs qualifications. Otherwise, they'll be too consumed about the little creepy crawlies and insects and all of the other worms that are crawling in that little bucket of water. So we need to clean that out. Put some chlorine. They're called the 4 sadhanas, by the way. We also have another example. If you imagine a dark room, and inside this room is a mirror, and imagine like there's a hole, right, in this room, and through the hole is shining the sun. Now in the room it's completely dark. Why is it dark? Because there's no light in there. Now this room represents not only your body, but also represents the entire world. And then you have inside this dark room a mirror. The moment that light shines through that hole onto this mirror, what happens to the entire room? The entire room gets lit up. Why? Because there is what we call a reflecting medium. In other words, the moment you add a subtle body inside otherwise a dark body, that body now lights up. That body now made aware of all of the sensation that it carries, but it also lights up the entire world. So again, the question is, where is the world unless you are in this body? Where's the world unless you're in this body? There is no world. In other words, Brahman requires the jiva with a physical body to see the world.
When I say I am this body, so who is saying that? The I, the original consciousness, or the I, reflected consciousness?
The entire experience from the beginning to the end, because of the original, that experience was known to be. But who's saying it? It is the reflected consciousness. How do you know? Because the reflected consciousness always changes its statements. But the experience, your general existence that never ends, no matter what you say, I am this or I am that, the existence of that general beingness of presence, it doesn't change no matter what the I says about itself. So you can say, I am enlightened, I am not enlightened. But even though, irrespective of that, there is still a presence underneath all of that, in whose presence both statements were shone upon, were light up.
So when you use this sentence with that example, I am this dirty water, you said that I is the original consciousness, and everything beyond that, this dirty water is not the original consciousness, right?
You can only say that because of the original consciousness. So it doesn't matter whether the water is clean or dirty. The point is, the whole experience can only be said because of the original consciousness, awareing the dirty bucket or the clean bucket. That's the point.
So my confusion is when I say that I'm this body, or when I say that I'm not this body, in these two sentences, how do I know that which I is talking about it?
Yeah, because whether you say it or not, or whether you say one or the other, you still are, you still exist. So it doesn't touch your general existence. See, your existence doesn't need to be qualified by what you say about yourself. You can say, I don't exist. You can say, I exist. But the point is, you still exist, irrespective of what you say about yourself. So how do you know? You know because even when you stop inquiring, how do I know? You still are, right? I don't need to now prove that you are, but you still are. And that are-ness, that amness, is the original chit.
That's right. So my question is, how do I make sure where I'm, like sthit pragya, when you say sthit pragya, in which I am based in. Am I sthit pragya and then I'm saying I'm this body or I'm not this body, or I'm saying it from the point of view of the jiva? So because knowledge means where you are settled at.
Yeah.
You getting my point?
You're always established in the self. You cannot be outside the self. Because you're always established in the self, this person called Mina can make those statements. This body called Mina's body can make those statements only because you are. In other words, chit does not get qualified, does not get affected by what statements you say about yourself in reference to your body and your mind.
Yeah, true. But when this all knowledge gaining process that I'm doing through Vedanta, it's for the jivahood, it's to relieve from the jivahood, right? True. So it's from shifting from jivahood to the original consciousness, right?
Yeah.
So right now I'm established in jivahood because of avidya. And that's why I say that I'm this body. So I want to know what is the litmus test for me to understand where I'm established at this point in time.
The first example was the buckets, and the one sun is shining on so many buckets, but the one bucket that knows itself will say, aha, so whatever is making myself known, whatever is making this body known, whatever is making my mind known is not this person, but it's this one same consciousness that is making every other mind and body known. So suppose I'm in like a little mental breakdown, and I'm having a mental breakdown that's called Andre's mental breakdown, but Justine is in a wonderful world. Now, the emotions and the thoughts belong to Andre's mind, and the emotions and the thoughts of peacefulness and so on belong to Justine's mind. But that one sun is because of which Justine's mind of peace is illumined, and that one sun is because of which Andre's messed up thoughts are also illumined. So in other words, the sun never gets touched. So in Vedanta, what we say is, you are not that which you undergo, but your nature is chit, that because of which your emotions and thoughts are known to be what they are, known to be so. The deluded ones do not recognize that this jiva is the one who leaves the body, that this subtle, this eternal jiva is the one that leaves the body. In other words, they believe that the body has its own consciousness. In other words, the person is gone forever. So suppose someone's there and they're about to die. Now, what it says is the deluded ones do not know that when there's death of that person has not actually died, right? Only their most insignificant portion of the humanhood, which is called the Annamaya kosha, the food sheath, has stopped. But that same person who you were just having an interaction with is still very much aware of oneself, no different than they were just 5 minutes ago. Therefore, they have not died. And this is why in chapter 2, Krishna tells to Arjuna grieve not for these people. And what are you talking about? How can I not grieve for my Bhishma, grandsire, and Drona, and so on? Well, because, even if they do die, the person hasn't died, only their physical body is dead, but their jiva is just going to go on to a different body, to a different loka, or maybe they're not going to come back at all. So the deluded ones do not know, because they think that once the person is gone, they're gone, but nothing has actually gone, only the physical body. The person is very much having a great time right now. Why so? Because the physical, heavy, dense body is no longer holding them down. In fact, it's a struggle to hold this body up, to actually inherit this body. You have to deal with the destruction of dendrites in the brain, with the heart weakness, the back pain. All of that is pulling the jiva's experience down. It makes it very hard to actually experience divinity in the first place. And so this person has been relieved of that. But what actually survives, what actually leaves the body, again, is this reflecting medium and this reflecting consciousness. In other words, the reflecting medium survives, but their physical body on this side is now from vertical into horizontal. But this one is now flying away and looking for another world, to inherit another physical body. What survives? Anandamaya kosha, Vijnanamaya kosha, Manomaya kosha. And the pranamaya kosha also survives because it is also part of the subtle body. And then jnana chakshuhu, those who have the eye of wisdom, as though see this jiva leave the body. Now you can actually incorporate this, next time, there will be a next time. What comes to your mind when you see someone that's about to die? Chapter 15, verse 10, right? The jnana chakshuhu pashyanti. Those who are wise see that what's actually leaving is the jiva. The person is not dead. They're not dead at all. Just like the invisible electricity is blessing the fan. So that's what jnana chakshuhu is. I see the physical, but I actually see something behind the physical. And therefore, that's the eye of wisdom, right? I see the electricity powering that fan. In that same way, the jiva, the invisible jiva, which used to bless this physical body, is no longer blessing this physical body, because the physical body is not capable of hosting it. Verse 11.
The wise ones who lived according to universal values to purify the mind and earn Bhagavan's grace, and applied Atma, Anatma, Viveka insistently, come to effortlessly discern the subject, Atma, and object, Anatma. The non-discerning ones, even though striving, awareness, Paramatma, is experienced, known as subtle intellectual concept only.
Krishna divides a mind into two categories, the discerning and the non-discerning. In other words, aparoksha jnanam and paroksha jnanam. Discerning and non-discerning reference to what? Satya, Mithya. Okay, so Satya and Mithya discerning. In other words, the non-discerning one only knows about Mithya, only knows about the world. The discerning one also includes the other half, the Satchit. Let's look at the discerning ones, the aparoksha jnanam. Aparoksha means direct knowledge. So simple concept, you take a fan, you recognize, when you see a fan, you actually recognize something behind, as I said before. You see the invisible electricity. This means I am discerning. You say, well, where's the electricity? It doesn't exist. Well, it does exist because of my knowledge alone. And this is the beauty of knowledge alone. You don't have to experience, you don't have to wait for years and years to have some divine vision or some divine experience to confirm that you are at one with the Lord. You simply, on the basis of knowledge alone, as I said earlier, body is alive, mind is there, and therefore that mind is pervaded by the chit, and that chit is none other than awareness. Therefore, the chit is always right then and there, even though it is not directly perceived. So the wise ones, they recognize the gross body. They see the gross body of any person, and they recognize that gross body is blessed by the mind, and the mind is further sculpted by the samskaras, by the impressions of your life, by it could be sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic mixture, depending on what kind of life the person has lived. It is also sculpted by the environment. And that mind is further, the entire mind program is further operated through what's called dharma, the program of dharma. If you take out dharma, then the mind would not know what is right or wrong. It would have no clue. It would hurt itself and would have no sense of fear. So you have to give that mind, that highly complex mind of so many experiences that it goes through, you have to give it this final program called dharma. That is what is right and what is wrong, what is acceptable or appropriate and unacceptable or inappropriate. And once this mind is sculpted through so many different variables, it then finally comes to the physical body, and that physical body you then call the person, the final person. And this is why we have so many different individuals in this world, because their mind is sculpted by so many of these variables. So when we see the person on the outside, what are you actually seeing? You're actually seeing the mind, and that mind is sculpted by the impressions, the past impressions, the environment of this life, but also sometimes those impressions are so strong they're able to override dharma. And this is why the person, despite knowing I should not hurt you, still ends up hurting, because their impressions are able to override that natural program of non-injury, that ahimsa program. Whereas the wise ones recognize that this chit is pervading that very mind. In other words, that mind, whatever that mind is, the wise ones always keep in mind that mind is pervaded by the same chit that is pervading Andre's mind and also Mina's mind. So whatever questions Andre has, whatever questions Mina has, because the mind has these questions, what makes that aware? That same chit, that same awareness. Yoginaha pashyanti enam avastitam atmani. So again, the yogis see, due to their knowledge, due to their jnanam, that this chit is attaining in the buddhi as the reflected consciousness, and thus it is enlivening the mind of all beings in this world, even an elephant or a mosquito. In India, when we say namaskara, why we say namaskara? We say namaskara to the eternal jiva who is actually enlightened right now but doesn't know it. So we don't really think like this. We just say namaskara, namaskaram. But what actually happens between, what I'm actually saying is, you, Mr. or Mrs. Eternal Jiva, are actually free right now. Your nature is such it right now. But because your bucket is so dirty, you're too consumed with your dirt. And therefore, you don't ever have the chance to see who you are. Because how can the light reflect anything other than the worms and the, all of the dirty stuff in the mind? So when I say namaskara, I'm actually acknowledging that the truth of you is this satchit, which is the same truth of me, which is this satchit. And finally, how do they accomplish this? Yatantaha. They accomplish this through effort, through striving. And this is the most important part, right? Self-effort. And that means consistent practice, consistent thinking in the light of this knowledge. And this is how it becomes part of your being. Okay, so now you're writing notes down and you're going, wow, and so on. But then you say, how do I live this? How do I breathe this? Yatantaha, striving through this passion, through devotion, through healthy virtues. Okay, and then we've got the non-discerning. These are the samsaris. Also, the non-discerning can be the category of paroksha jnanam. So paroksha jnanam is intellectual notion that I am Brahman, but it's kind of like saying I am a businessman, right? It doesn't mean anything. It's an empty statement. So I am Brahman. It's an empty statement. So that's paroksha jnanam. Or samsaris. That means those who are participating in the world of ups and downs, and they're okay with that. You say you need to look for something else. No, I'm okay being samsara. So those are the non-discerning ones. They also focus on, when they look for a guru, they look for the outer appearances. Usually they want to see someone that represents an image that's supposedly liberated or something. They have to be a certain age or a certain gender or and so on. So, and it's very hard to get across to them, right? You say, well, it's got nothing to do with your gender. It's got to do with your yatantaha, your striving in the past. And that's what makes the person who they are today. They will also discuss Brahman as a object, right? Let's discuss on a forum. Let's go to a forum and I will advise you how you are non-dual. I will advise you how you are at one with everything. You cannot discuss this because if one has really understood this knowledge, there is no need to discuss it. It's like discussing how you're wearing a female or a male body. It's so obvious that it doesn't even occur to you. It's the same thing here. If one discusses this knowledge, it implies that this knowledge is still separate from their understanding. In other words, we only discuss those things that we haven't fully understood. In other words, you don't discuss how to drive a car to a random stranger, right? because you so much know how to drive a car, it is ridiculous to discuss how to drive a car. So same thing here. The unwise, they also want Brahman to be some special experience. And this is, of course, thanks to samsara, which has, the jiva has gone through so many ages, right? They're so accustomed to experiencing ups and downs that even when it comes to spirituality, the same concept remains. I want to experience the world. Now I want to experience spirituality. So even experiencing like a meditation or some samadhis, they become the end in life. They want to experience God as some unique flavor or some unique experience to validate the ahamkara, to validate the sense of I. So in other words, the ego wants to add an extra experience onto its resume, and this is called chasing for the experience. And when you say to such a mind, Brahman is not an experience, it is who you are right now, in whose presence all of your questions and no questions arise and are validated, then it's saying, no, it's something else. But then lifetimes later, hopefully the person comes to this knowledge and says it is the most ordinary, helpless awareness that you cannot do anything about. Helpless awareness, right? If I say, hey, please stop being aware right now, you can't do it, right? You're helplessly aware. Why? Because we said that Sat Chit is pervading all the time. So whether I think about Sat Chit, I still am. Whether I don't think about Sat Chit, I still am. Because the body is pervaded by the Sat Chit. The mind is pervaded by the Sat Chit. And because it's pervaded by the Sat Chit, what's the experience of that? Self-evident I, right? Self-validating I. You don't need to prove that you are. No one needs to prove your existence. And because you are self-proving, self-evidencing, all of your doubts and all of your certainties come out of the mind, because the mind is just a constant thought-generating machine. It constantly generates thoughts. This one, that one. Sometimes it smiles, sometimes it doesn't smile. But all of that is validated because of this one Sat Chit. Okay, and then once the individual has accepted this simple fact, Vedanta has done its job. And then you say, then what? Then you continue your life as usual. What now? What now that I've gained this knowledge? Nothing. You continue your sphere of influence in small areas that you can impact. You gladly participate in that. Mia?
So when I say that I am, and we use this sentence to prove that you are self-aware, nobody else has to prove that you don't exist.
Yeah.
But with this, I also know that I came into existence at the time of the birth, and I will go out of existence, at the time of the death. So I am, that I'm aware of myself, is only valid for that limited period of time: birth, this existence, and death. So how can I say that this is the proof of the existence of the awareness? Because this is again limited awareness of me.
Yeah, in other words, the one awareness, the one Chit is pervading all bodies. So as long as there's a body that comes into the field, what we call the mithya field, as long as there's a body there that's able to receive nothing but a bunch of thoughts and emotions, then those thoughts and emotions are pervaded by this Chit. And therefore those thoughts and emotions become aware of themselves.
And when I don't have the body, does that mean that the subtle body is not aware of itself?
When you don't have a physical body, the subtle body called Mina, in this life at least, is exactly aware of her thoughts as she is right now. So she's still able to remember everything that's happened in this life and still able to feel, emotionally close to those people in this life. And the moment that subtle body then inherits another physical body, then all of the past thoughts, all of the past life thoughts are forgotten from that moment on. Because you need that chance to, work out you continue your life in a fresh start. So that is a good thing. It's a fresh start for all of us. If you lived forever, would that be useful? You couldn't forget all of the hurt that people give you, and you need a fresh start. Mina?
Yeah, so I'm kind of challenging myself on my own understanding through these sentences that because nobody has to prove that I exist. That's a indicator of, that you are that eternal presence, that eternal consciousness.
Yeah.
But then my mind is giving me or challenging me by saying that your awareness that you're talking about right now, which you are equating it with the eternal consciousness or existence, you can't drive that conclusion because your awareness is only limited of this birth. That's it. What if there is nothing, beyond death? And I have no idea what was there, before I was born.
We said that your awareness cannot be different from mine because the only ways you can state that is by attributing some kind of an attribute of being limited or so. That word limited is a concept that you picked up in this world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, my awareness is big or small. That's just concepts you pick up in a language of Hindi or English or so on, right? And all of that is being made aware. This person's mind is also being made aware of whatever the mind is going through. So the one awareness is attributeless. And that one attributeless awareness is the same in and through for all of us. The chit. And that awareness, you are. So it's really simple as that. The moment there is a mind that gets born in this field called Mina, immediately that mind will start to helplessly bring up all sorts of questions and doubts and concerns that are nothing but a collection of all of the objects in this world, because every object, every thought and doubt is nothing but a collection of objects. In other words, whenever you ask me an objection, it always consists of words that are objects in this world.
Right.
And those objects in this world were picked up in this world. That means those objects have nothing to do with the underlying amness that is true in and through for all of us. And that, as the Upanishads say, that very awareness is not different from the final truth called Brahman.
Okay. And that is my paroksha jnana as of now, indirect knowledge, right?
Just the fact that you say that you know, that you say that you're ignorant, says that you're not ignorant, because the awareness is shining the thought that you're ignorant. So you cannot be ignorant. When I say you in this case, I'm talking about the chit, right? So
Yes,
what is
ignorant?
The mind? So what is ignorant? The mind is ignorant, but not you, the chit, the one that's awareing Mina's thoughts saying that it's ignorant.
So it means that I still think of myself as the body and mind. And because of that, all these questions and all this discussion is coming up.
Yeah, you can think that or you don't think that, but it doesn't affect you, the chit.
Right, right.
That's why you say Vedanta is not about, putting oneself above the world or like establishing oneself like high. You can still speak of yourself as a person, but now the knowledge has taken place. The only reason why I'm able to speak about this person as a person is because of this all-pervasive chit. Knowing that I can now live my life like a normal human, ordinary human being.
Guruji, one question, sorry, maybe you can answer it next time, but he talks about the striving yogins. So clearly, are we still at an intellectual level just understanding this? There's a lot more striving to be done.
Yeah.
Is that my understanding?
Yeah, and as I said, time just takes time to, remove those silly notions that are kind of denying this knowledge. They're saying, you're not what's so obvious. So yeah, it is the difference between time and effort, as we said here, yatantaha, striving.
There's a lot more striving to be done. We have understood this only at an intellectual level as of now. I mean, just kind of a different way of what Meena is trying to ask. I can kind of understand what she's trying to say. Is like, we have understood this at an intellectual level at this point. We are at the kindergarten level, and possibly we need to strive when we say,
and
to get into that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Attain it. There's nothing to attain, but yet I think we still have something to attain.
Yeah, this is wonderful. So your honesty, number one, is most important. As long as you're honest and open wherever you are and openly honest to the public, here's where I'm at, that is exactly where you're going to get your Ishwara's grace. The person that holds back and tries to pretend, that one is going to just extend their journey in a partial understanding. So the first thing is honesty. And this is what I love about Meena. She's and also Anu is now brought up. So thank you. Question: did Krishna say to Arjuna that if moksha is not realized in this lifetime, it is not wasted, and next lifetime it will not come across? It will come across as knowledge again. It will come across as impressions, which will pull you towards the right circumstances that will quickly accelerate your progress. which otherwise would have not done had you have not attended to this Bhagavad Gita and lessons in the previous life. During deep sleep, mind is shut down, but you still exist. Maybe before birth and after death is akin to deep sleep state. Deep sleep is totally different from in-between states, because deep sleep, the mind's resolved. In between, the mind is free to roam, guided obviously by devatas. I don't have any logical argument to say that you are consciousness, but are different from me, consciousness, but I don't feel that way. I still feel that you are different, not logically from me. How to remove this feeling? It goes back to what Anu was saying, just time, because this is Paroksha Jnana. Just give it some time. How does one know if moksha has been, quote, attained, even though there's nothing to attain, as Anu has put? The answer is very simple. Suppose you want something and you want it for a long time because it matters to you for a long time. Now, suppose you get it and it's actually right there, right in front of you. Now, suppose you keep on asking for it. How are you going to feel? Silly, right? Feel goofy. It's like, why am I asking for this when it's so obvious that it's right in front of me? It's like, if you're happy, you don't ask, am I happy? It's so obvious that you're happy that if someone offers you a book, how to be happy, you're going to probably throw it in a fire or something, right? Because the book cannot touch the actual, quote, experience of your happiness. And the second reason is because the person is not going to have any regrets about what happened in the past. Why? Because all of the stupid things that a person has done, it was because of owing to this innocent ignorance of the individual. When the knowledge takes place, then I realize all of those stupid things that the jiva has done in this life, they belong to the jiva, not to Satchit. The Satchit was just simply illuminating all of those experiences. So in other words, there's no regret about the person's life in terms of, oh God, please forgive me for my mistakes. You're already free, right? So in other words, no regrets. And number two, asking for moksha after gaining moksha becomes a rather goofy, a silly process. In other words, the seeking totally stops. Even though the person is still going to continue listening to the knowledge because it's called nindithyasanam, purifying the mind, those notions that are hardly ingrained, but it becomes very obvious that you just don't seek other schools just in case you missed maybe something out. You go, maybe moksha is incorrect. I want to seek if someone else person has something better to say. So that totally stops. Thank you for my first session. Okay, thank you. And one final question. From my understanding, we just focused on purifying the mind. Knowledge will take place once it's sattvic. Am I right? Absolutely. So that basically sums up those 4 sadhanas. Live an honest, virtuous life, focus on the Lord, and be interested in this because it's your right to be free, right? Because you're inherently free. Therefore, it is the duty of a human being, of a manushya, thinking being, to liberate oneself. In fact, it's a crime not to liberate yourself. As a jiva, of course, you're already liberated right now, speaking from standpoint of the final chit. A student from Chinmaya said, just being born is himsa. Because just to be born, one has to, consume, has to throw rubbish away, has to innocently hurt people. So just to be born is already, start of one's himsa. Therefore, the best thing, I'm going to quote Ramana Maharishi, the greatest gift you can give to the world is self-realization, right? Because you relieve the world from impurities, from the mind, from one more person consuming the world resources. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May all be happy, may all be free from illness, may all behold good things, and may no one suffer.